ready.
Welcome everybody to the September meeting of the Public Works. And as usual, we have a consent agenda and a general agenda. Joining me here today are Vice Chair Councilmember Burke, committee members Annette Scipio and John Larson, and we also have Councilmember Mundy. And on today's agenda, we have 4 consent agenda items, 3 general agenda items. Does anybody have any consent agenda items they want to pull? I have one, but C3. I would like to pull C1. John would like to have C2. Anybody for C4? We would have a trifecta. Okay, so C1, C2, and C3. All right, go ahead. C1, please.
Item C1.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh.
The one remaining, C4. Can I get a
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Favor? Aye. Ayes have it. Now, can we have C1?
Item C1, resolution authorizing an application for the federal funding through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law Drinking Water State Revolving Fund Lead Service Line Replacement Program.
All right, Ms. Driver, can we get a very brief on this? And one of the reasons I pulled this is that I got a question about how citizens will find out what their responsibility is for their internal cost structure when it is finally decided how the rules are going to apply. So
Okay. Yes.
speak to that.
Yes. Good afternoon. So this is a resolution requesting that the City Council approve an application for federal funding to replace lead service lines. This piece will be just to replace service lines within the public right-of-way. Once the lead and copper rule improvements rule gets finalized in October, we'll have a better idea of what requirements we'll have on private property, and that will be, the utilities requirements. The funding cycle is every 2 months, and it's $2 million per month, or per funding cycle. As far as the customer's responsibility, we will know more after October, but we can't require someone to go in and replace pipes on their private property. So once we have more of an idea of what the utilities requirements will be after October, we'll be able to communicate that better, and there'll be funding available and some programs that we put into place to help with those initiatives later on this year.
And will we notify people through mail-outs, through our social media campaigns, through TV 13, those kind of things?
Yes, all the above. So we'll post it on our website. We'll do mailers. Any potential resource that we have, we'll definitely take advantage of that to communicate.
Thank you. Okay. Motion to approve this? Okay. In favor?
Hey.
We'll go electronically or voice? Good. So many options. All right. That's unanimous. Thank you. C2.
Item C2, resolution authorizing changes in the state highway secondary road system within the existing corporate limits of the city of Winston-Salem.
Councilmember Larson.
Thank you. I just have a very simple simple questions, and there's more about definition and explanation of what's really going on here. As I understand, we have a piece of property that's owned currently by the state, which is a remnant of an old highway system that the state maintained and operated. And this land is being transferred now back to the city for ownership. And it'll be our property to have maintained and what have you. But the POW, would you explain what the POW Act bill is, how it relates to this project?
Councilmember Larson, yes, sir. And good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. This is Jeff Antler, Director of Transportation for the City of Winston-Salem. Councilmember Larson, to answer your question, this is a remnant from the Beltway project and the interchange there with University Parkway. You may be aware the University Parkway had to get realigned to the east to accommodate the full interchange at that location, and in doing so, it left a remnant of a small section of University Parkway. Periodically, we review those remnants and these right-of-way elements like this with the state to see what makes the most sense on who maintains those. And this is a determination that both the city staff and NCDOT agree that this section of University Parkway and what it serves will be best served by the city of Winston-Salem as the maintaining ownership party for that street segment. Regarding the POW bill, of course, the city does receive NCDOT POW bill in state of North Carolina POW funds to maintain our surface transportation infrastructure. So what I'm saying by this in the item is this street segment, when added to our POW bill and added to our maintenance list, would be eligible to receive and participate in those POW funds, which help assist in the maintenance dollars associated with the maintenance for the street segment.
My understanding is the power bill is the money that's generated from the revenue from fuel taxes.
That's correct.
And so that's a diminishing fund probably with electric cars.
That trajectory does impact the fuel tax, correct.
So do we have plans for this property?
Councilmember Larson, this is a road remnant, so this is still an active street, and it is serving some adjacent properties today. It will remain a street, so the property is actually right-of-way serving a physical street asset.
So it serves residents.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
Okay, if I get a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Second.
Thank you. All vote is unanimous. And final consent agenda, item C3.
Item C3, consideration of items related to the use of Federal Transit Administration's Innovative Coordinated Access and Mobility Pilot Program.
Mr. Fansler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this item before you is consideration of the ICAM grant, which is an FTA funding source for agencies such as ours that receive FTA dollars to operate our transit system in this region. And they made, in 2021, $3.5 million available to pursue this grant. Of course, we did receive $320,000. And as indicated in this item, the use here, and you're going to start to see more of this. Actually, I think next month we're going to be bringing an item back to update some of the changes with WISTA and kind of our trajectory where we're going with the new contractor and some of the modernization elements we're going forward. And this is one of the steps in that direction where essentially this grant will be used for some of our system and software upgrades. You may have heard some old terms called Trapeze, which is a system that we use for our paratransit scheduling service. And that system is obsolete and going away, and we're going to be making some changes to to a software called EchoLane. And if you recall in the negotiations with the new provider, that was one of their proposals to help bring this to our organization to help streamline those paratransit scheduling services. And so what you're seeing here in this item is $320,000 through the pilot program, the ICAM grant, through FTA, to pursue that change in software and some modernization for our mobile ticketing and things that we're moving forward, kind of set the stage up to fund those efforts moving forward. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Councilmember Scipio.
Yes, Mr. Fansler, I think my concern was it's called a pilot program, but we're going to be doing software that we're going to keep. So it's not necessarily a pilot. It's just funding through this federal title.
The ICAM program does provide funding, and it does not have a shot clock or anything tied to it. So this is an eligible expense for that program.
Okay. And so we will be keeping the software and using it?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. I move for approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. We shall vote. Passes unanimously. On to our general agenda items. May I have G1, please?
Item G1, public hearing and consideration on ordinance to name and rename 3 roads on the campus of Salem Academy and College located in the South Ward.
Thank you. We have Shailene Bowen with Map Forsyth here to help us out with this one.
Good afternoon. So as they're pulling up the map, you can see that Salem College has requested 2 roads be named. Those are just access roads that were already existing in their schools. So you have Spirit and Sabre that are labeled down at the bottom. And then they're requesting that a section of Rams Drive be renamed to Leaders Drive. Part of this is a program that we've been trying to deal with all the colleges and making sure they're addressed properly and that emergency services will have an actual addressed building. Salem College was one that had a mix of addressed and unaddressed and buildings that were behind and not accessible. So with that, I will take any questions about this item.
Questions from committee or others? Councilmember Larson.
The only one that's really being renamed is Rams, right? The other
Correct.
The other ones are just already.
Right, and it's only the section of Rams Drive that is on Salem College, so the 400 block of Rams Drive.
That's a public street. The other streets are private.
They're a part of the campus, correct.
Councilmember Larson, just for clarification, the portion of Rams Drive that's being renamed is private. The
It's private,
public
yes.
section is east of Salem Avenue.
And this is, like I said, this is an exercise that we've been through with Salem State and Wake Forest University.
Correct.
And it's for clarity purposes and mostly for, well, a large reason is for public safety. It helps police and fire to more easily identify locations.
Correct.
Okay. So, any further questions? Okay, if I can get a motion, please.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Let's call the vote.
Councilmember McIntosh, I think that's supposed to be a public hearing, so we need to
Oh, okay.
Just
So
do-
do I need to close it?
just, yeah, close this.
Okay. So is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak to this? If not, I'll close the public hearing and now call for the motion to approve. Take that as a motion and a second.
Yes.
Motion.
All right,
Thank you.
We have.
now let's vote. Robert's rules and everyone else. All right, that's unanimous. All right, G2.
Item G2, public hearing and consideration on ordinance to name an unnamed private right-of-way in the 200 block of Jones Road to Jones White Trail in the city limits of Winston-Salem, located in the southeast ward.
All right, Shaylee, I think we're going to stick with you on this.
We are. So this, as it said, was a private road, unnamed. Basically, what happened was it existed as a driveway for 2 residents. There is now a 3rd resident that has been built, and that exceeds the number that we allow. Also, we do not have the ability to give them an address number because Jones Road has already been addressed out. And so we accepted their petition to rename, or should we say name, this private right-of-way, and it was settled on Jones White Trail. Any questions?
Questions from the committee? Councilmember Sick.
Yes, just clarification. It is a private road. We will not be maintaining it. It's just being given
That's-
a name.
That's correct.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? All right, this is a public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience that has questions? Seeing no one, I close the public hearing and ask for a motion.
I move for approval. Second?
We have a motion and a second. I would ask for a vote. That is unanimous. Thank you, committee.
Item G3, information related to the modernization of on-street and municipal maintained off-street parking systems throughout downtown Winston-Salem.
Thank you. We have Mr. Fansler up here, and let me just preempt by saying that this is a once-in-a-half-a-decade effort to modernize, to look at our overall on-street and off-street parking scenario. We have not done this in probably 40 or 50 years, so it's kind of unusual for us to bring something back twice for information, but we are doing that in this case. So we want to make sure we measure twice. I'm going to borrow this from Councilmember Taylor, measure twice, cut once. So we have Mr. Fansler up here and with help from from Reed over there to back him up so we can get a briefing on this. I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. If you'll bear with me, this item will take us a little bit of time to get through, but we want to be thorough. But I want to just preface this by saying, as Mr. Chair mentioned, this is an information item to consider a couple things. Number one, changes to our parking ordinances. Okay, that's the key component of this because you'll notice in the exhibits attached to this item are some of the changes that we're talking about. And as we go through the presentation, you'll see some of the things that we're talking about. And then element 2 to this item is really an agreement with Pay by Phone, which is a technology-based vendor to modernize our parking system where the user would have a technology-based, likely on a smartphone, app to facilitate their municipal-owned parking in downtown Winston-Salem. Okay, those are the 2 main things up for consideration, but as the chair mentioned, this is an information item. As we go through some of this, we do plan to bring this back pending our discussion, and you'll hear more about that as we go through. But I just want to make a couple comments before I jump into the presentation. Number one is Winston-Salem is currently the largest municipality in the state of North Carolina that does not hold a contract with some type of mobile or vendor to help with some of the collections and fee-based structure that you have to see for municipal parking in the state of North Carolina. And so I'll remind us all that in November of 2023, staff did bring an item to this committee to talk about some of the issues that we're seeing with the parking program, with the age of our equipment, with the technology deficits that we're dealing with the maintenance burdens, right? And some of the challenges that we're experiencing in the downtown setting. And from there, we committed that we would then pursue a request for qualifications, right, to pursue a technology-based solution to kind of modernize our system, what will allow for the user experience to be benefit, to increase, to engage the citizens with some type of interface with a mobile device to allow them to access our space availability and where those may be at the handheld device level. But from there, additionally, we went through the RFQ process and we did identify, we had 7 proposals and a number of different staff was on the selection committee, and we've scored those. And pay by phone, which you'll hear from in a moment, was the preferred vendor. So, all that to say, the next several minutes, I'm going to go through some of these slides, Mr. Chair, if that's okay with you. We'll talk about where our parking program is today, where we've been. Then we're going to bring up Mr. Reed, who I'll stop and take a point of privilege, who has done tremendous work in this space, really diving into details of what we can have in our city and where we need to be going. So from there, I will jump right into the presentation. Let's take a moment and just talk a little bit about what we already know and what we've seen in the past is kind of where our parking program is currently. Right, we have 2 parking decks. That's the off-street component. 6 and Cherry Trade, that's number 1, outside the convention center. And then, of course, the larger is 4th and Church. Those are the 2 municipally owned parking decks that the city owns. Of course, there are a few surface lots that we do have as well, City Hall North and South. We have a couple in the Forsyth County building there at the new parking deck. Some of those are also owned and maintained by the city of Winston-Salem. And then, of course, no secret, we own and manage a tremendous amount of on-street parking through the municipal area, right? So on-street and off-street, both of those components are true in downtown. And then another major component is the enforcement piece, right? There are 3 enforcement officers today. They typically patrol from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and primarily in the downtown area, and primarily those on-street spaces. Let's dive deeper and talk a little bit about the state of the parking program. So it doesn't take too much looking at these pictures. You can kind of see the state of where we're at, right? Some very dated equipment, some gate arms that typically malfunction, that number of which do not currently work. If you've spent so much time in our parking off-street facilities downtown, you've witnessed this firsthand. There are some challenges with our egress equipment and the ability to keep those functioning given their age, right? So we're equipped with gate arms, the old-fashioned ticket spitters where you press the button, it gives you the ticket, and then you reconcile that on your way out. And then attendant booths, right? We man those to receive those tickets, calculate your fees on your way out to the attendants that occupy those off-street facilities. And then, again, all of this is infrastructure that is decades old and now obsolete. The parts you can no longer get. They no longer have service agreements that you can even hire folks to come in and maintain those. A lot of challenges, a tremendous amount with maintaining and upkeep of the current equipment that we have. And then transitioning to the on-street side, it's more of the same. We have the very dated single quarter meters, right? There's no secret, there's many of those downtown. So what you're seeing in the picture there is not unfamiliar to anyone in this room. But also we have the little bit more modern, but still at this point severely obsolete, are the digital kiosks there where you can punch in and get your ticket there. Those do allow for credit cards, which has been a benefit, but again, still a little bit behind where we need to be with the little kiosks there. But as you see, the 25 cent meters, we have the pay stations that I just mentioned, and then those apply to the different time restrictions downtown. We have some 1 hour, 2 hour, and they're applied differently throughout. So it's kind of a mix match theme throughout downtown of a combination of these type treatments. Let's talk a little bit about what we're up against, right? So this is in Winston-Salem already. These are some of the elements in some of the more modern technology that is already in our city that we're competing against for parking downtown. You see some of the digital options, the QR codes, the pay, the call, the options that exist, some of the elements that other providers in our city currently are utilizing and have the user experience that much more convenient and much more reliable than what the city offers today. So let's pause there and talk a little bit about really, as a user, what do the parkers really want, right? Well, there's three things that come to mind, right? We want to know where is an available space, how close is that to my destination, how much will it cost me? And I'm happy to say, and we talked a little bit about this in November, is that we wanted a vendor to solve these three things. And that was clear in our proposal to go out and solicit proposals that solve these three things, where a user could understand through a technology solution, likely on their phone, where they could find a space that would clearly indicate how long they intended to park and how close it was to the destination, how much it would cost me to park there, right? And have that accessible and easily user-friendly for those that want to visit and then plan their trip downtown, right? And I'm happy to say that what you'll hear from Reed in just a moment will explain more about how in my opinion, we've successfully been able to do that with a recommended firm that we're going to propose. So why modernization? And this is my attempt for some comedic relief for a very tense and very intense topic, right? Is, well, let's talk about why we need to modernize. Well, it just doesn't take long to go back to what we have, right? Some of this stuff and say, well, maybe that's why we should modernize, right? Because the users are telling us we should, right? This is the stuff where our office is getting the calls and say, well, the gate arms are up. Why do I feel secure in the parking deck? The gate arms are up. Why do I have to pay? The gate arms are up, or the ticket, the pay station doesn't work, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the calls that we're getting, and that's why we're modernizing, right? To allow the user experience to transition from that Winston-Salem experience of municipal parking to an experience that we can rely on, and that the user has the capacity on their phone to manage their stay, right? Which is not what we have today. So, from there, again, in this comedic kind of pause, it's the maintenance, right? We've got to move from where we've been to where I think can be a little bit more of manageable, and then put that burden on a vendor that does this and have that be the driver for our municipal parking. So, the real reasons, all right? Now we'll move past the comedy and we'll get into why we're doing this, but the user experience, right? We talked a little bit about that. We want to invite folks with modern equipment that is reliable, that has convenient transactions. They don't have to get out, find the pay station, pay for it, and then go back to their car before going to their destination, which may be in the same direction they just came from, right? And to allow them to plan their stay, to have the experience on their phone where they can determine how long they want to stay, and they can use that ability to determine where the space is, how much they intend to purchase to stay, and then allow that to really streamline their experience in Winston-Salem. And that can be applied both on-street and off-street, and you'll hear more about that from our partners in just a moment of how that's applied in both on-street and off-street, right? But one of the things, too, is going through this type of modernization effort, right, is we're going to be able to have the flexibility to introduce some dynamic parking rates, maybe in the future, subject to some data we expect to get from the vendor, right? We're going to understand where the spaces are most utilized, where the turnover is, because with this technology solution, the back end, and these folks can talk much more about that than me, allows us to generate a lot of reporting, heat maps, and exposure to where the demand really is. And maybe there are some conventions, maybe there are some events downtown that drive some of the need for some flexible pricing to really value. And that's a component I want to hit home is, I think what this allows us to do is to value the curb space that the city has to offer, and allows us to make good on that through the dynamic capability that this program can offer. And lastly, and a key component of this is this allows us to really reduce the parking subsidy, right? And I'll let Reed get into more about this, but the cost associated with this and the benefit, right, ultimately allows the city subsidy, which is in the realm of about $700,000 a year, where we subsidize the parking program, and it changes that by fee management, by turnover, and by incentivizing the motorists to find a space in our downtown and pay for that space. So, before I invite Reed up to take it a little bit further and dive a little bit deeper, I want to just pause and say, what are we considering, right? What is the item up? Number one, I think we all need to understand the current condition of our equipment, right? If you spent some time downtown, you know, right? Our system is decades old, and it's no longer able to be maintained. Number two, Reed will get into a little bit more of this. We're going to talk about our peer city rates and practices. And if you look at this item, you'll notice the benchmarking that we've done. There's a number of other cities that we benchmark what their rates are and what they're doing in their municipality for their municipal parking management system. You'll see some of that, and that's clearly indicated in the item. But then I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of ordinance amendments and modifications that support this technology solution, right? So there's changes to our ordinances that allow the user to have a mobile solution for parking downtown. It removes some of that parking meter language that is in the ordinance and goes to the technology solution language is what really we're talking about. And then really, and you'll see this in some of the scenarios that Rita go through, is this sets the rate at $1.50 per hour for on-street, okay? What staff is recommending is a $1.50 per hour on-street parking in Winston-Salem. And there's a number of factors there, but what the data that we've seen and the benchmarking of peer cities and the implementation of this new system, where we need to be one, competitive, two, to value our curb space, and really eliminate the subsidy that the city is contributing to offset the parking program. And I think that $1.50 an hour does that for us, okay? And that's what you'll see as we get into a little bit more details of how that plays out. And then, as such, what we don't want to do, if we're raising the rates, we don't want to de-incentivize, we don't want it to be more cost-effective to get a parking violation, right, than it is to pay the fee. So in doing so, we thought about that. Well, you know, I'd rather just pay the $15 ticket and instead pay for on-street parking, right, and not have to deal with all that, right? Well, incrementally, we need to address both of those. So also in the ordinance, you'll see some adjustments to the parking fees. We're recommending some changes to those parking fees for the different types of violations you get for parking citations. And those are going up as well, largely from $15 to $30 in that range. And then lastly, there is a component of this with the ordinance changes that does establish a framework for EV charging in our municipally managed parking areas, which allows us to manage the electric vehicles on street in our city. And I know we have Lindsay here that can, if there's any specific questions, we can dive into that if we need to. But those are the elements that is up for consideration. And from there, I want to invite, and I mentioned this, I think I want to commend Reed publicly for really diving in on this. He spent a year of his career digging into the details on this, and I commend him for that work. And so from there, if you'll, I know we're going to be a little winded here, so bear with us, but we'll turn it over to Reed and let him take it from there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee and council. Reed Hutchins, Transportation Operations Manager for Winston-Salem DOT. We're going to spend a little bit of time, like Jeff said, we're going to dig in a little bit more about the departments and the city's proposed changes to the parking program. As Jeff mentioned, we did an RFQ. We sought out vendors to help modernize our parking program. The highest scored vendor was Pay by Phone. You'll hear from Mr. Singh here in a few minutes about more of what this program looks like. But let's just dive right in. So our team member, myself, Jeff, Bobby, and then we have Sang over here from Pay by Phone. We've been working closely together to get this to where it is right now, where this is an information item looking for action in the coming months. All right, so let's dive in a little bit more on our on-street operations and what Pay by Phone can offer the city. So our on-street solution, we have about 1,400 spaces right now currently that parking enforcement manages. We enforce those spaces regularly, time-restricted zones. We do have room to expand. Pay by Phone offers us the ability to do that through a signage solution with a location number. You can pay through the App Store, Google Play Store, use a credit card. You could pay online or even a phone number. So what this will look like. New installation of signs. Here's a sample sign that we're working to tailor a little more to where our logo might be a little bit more prominent. That's one thing that we're looking to do here is we want people to know that this is a city-owned facility. It's our maintenance. It's maintained by our enforcement. So you're getting the city people doing the job. It's not we're outsourcing it completely. So we're looking at removal of existing equipment. As Jeff mentioned, we have parking meters and gate arms and ticket spitters from 1999. They do not work anymore. They have been replaced with 2x4s as a gate arm at some points. We're trying to piece it along. 1999 was quite some time ago, so it's no surprise that it's not working. Like I mentioned, we're going to come in with new signs with clear city branding. And we're going to replace our existing street signs. One thing we don't want to do is add a completely new sign on top of the existing signs out there. So this is a good opportunity to also clean up our curb space with a new sign, fresh looking, modern, everything of that nature. All right, I'm going to call up Sang right now to To give us a little bit more information and dive into the pay-by-phone platform, we're going to do a demo, talk about the options to pay. So, Sang.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, Chairman.
Could we get your name and address just for the record, please?
Hi, my name is Sang Huang, and I'm from Pay by Phone. I'm the Regional Sales Director, and I've been working with the DOT team for about a past year.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for this invitation and this opportunity. And when we connected with the Department of Transportation about their desire to modernize the city, obviously we got very excited. And as we looked into areas where we can support and help facilitate the growth, the product that we offer is a mobile payment solution. It's primarily done through the app, but there are other forms of transacting. So our company, we are really playing a supporting role to municipalities and agencies to really use modern technology, in this case, a smartphone, to be the parking meter or parking kiosk that everyone owns these days in their pocket. So that's the mindset shift that we're trying to orient our partners and so forth. So as you can see, it's primarily done, I would say 85 to 90% of our transactions are conducted through our mobile app. In communities where smartphones may not be available, or for whatever reason, customers prefer not to download another app, there are other options, calling a toll-free number that will be engraved on the signage, where folks can use their flip phone or their office phone to call in and go through the automated process of paying for your parking transaction that way. You can use our website, for example. So what I like to do is, at this moment, I like to transition to using the tool here to do a demo on my app. Okay, great. So at the moment, I am sharing my telephone, and when you launch the Pay by Phone app, the first thing you'll see is geolocation information. What you will see is an image, and Reed and the team were looking at different images that will represent the city. So you'll see the first impression of what does Winston-Salem look like. It could be a picture of City Hall, it can be a very noticeable building. That will be the first impression to the city. So what you see here is that blue dot, that's the location of where I am. Now, as we zoom in, you'll also notice these purple dots dispersed throughout the city. Those are actually existing pay-by-phone locations already here in the city. We work with a local operator who has, I believe, 2-3 dozen locations already in the city. So the concept of pay-by-phone is very familiar already to some of your constituents. So as we zoom in, you can really get to the detail level. So when you start seeing these purple areas, those are actually locations, parking lots for the most part at the moment, of private operators that already have implemented the pay-by-phone system. So, as you walk around the city, you'll see our signs. It might look a little different, but for the city, we'll brand it a little different just so that there's brand recognition. And once you click on a location, you can actually start transacting. So for the purpose of this demo, we created 3 locations. Let's go to the 6th and Cherry deck here. So this is how easy it is to transact on our app. So I select the location, and we selected for the 6th and Cherry Tree parking deck, we assigned a location number 80702. So when you go to that deck, you'll see signage with that location number instructing the parker to enter that number. And once you set up an account on our system, you would have to enter information about the vehicles in your household. It can be your vehicle, your child's vehicle, your spouse's vehicle, credit card payment information, and all that is already set up in your initial setup. And I can just pick the vehicle that I like to park at that moment, and you can load up, I believe, 10 vehicles. I'm going to select this vehicle, and it's going to give me options of how long I like to pay for. So depending on the parking policies, the rate structure, whether it's an hour or a daily facility, we can reflect that exactly how you have it currently set up. So I'm going to say I just need to park for in about an hour. And this is quickly a summary of what it will cost. I believe we set the hourly rate at $1.50 for this example. And we're gonna go ahead, I already have a credit card associated with it. And just like that, it'll take a couple seconds for that transaction to go through. Now, once the transaction goes through, this is the consumer-facing side. So we just help facilitate a parker that visited your city to pay for their parking in a very streamlined, digitized way, as opposed to using your current infrastructure that might be inoperable at times. Now, what the city administrators and the DOT team will get is they're going to start getting rich information. So right now, when someone inserts quarters in the meters, there is no information. You just have a bunch of quarters that you've collected over time. You don't know when that was deposited, how long the parking transaction was associated with that. But once you start using the pay-by-phone system, you'll know each location, what street, whether it was on Trey Street between 6th and 7th, or a parking meter in front of this office, you'll start getting really granular, detailed information. Now, why that data is invaluable is when Jeff and his team look at repurposing some equipment that might be failing and recycling, or they want to start exploring dynamic pricing. So for example, on Main Street, maybe on certain nights, there is demand for, there's just too much congestion. That means the demand is there. So maybe we adjust pricing on weekends or nights and so forth. So it starts giving you some really important information that does not exist today. So that's in essence, how quickly and easy it is to use our system, not just to facilitate payment, but to actually be part of your long-term planning for policies, development, so on and so forth. And just one other thing is, because we already have a partner here in the city through ParkSmart, we looked at some data over going back about 2 years. They've been in the city for about almost 3 years now, but the last 12 months, there were approximately 69,000 transactions that occurred at the various parking lots that are already in the city. So that tells me that folks in your community already use the pay-by-phone app and are very familiar. So this really helps with the onboarding and really assimilating to this new modernization initiative. Okay. Thank you very much.
Can we stop here? Any questions about the demo? Councilmember Larson. Just a bit.
So there is no indication on the site where the vehicle's parked, whether or not it's in compliance with parking or not.
Sorry, Chairman, once again?
Current system of, you put a quarter in the machine, and if you're in violation, or the little flag comes up and whatever, it says your car is now in violation. The way it is right now, it's a transaction between you and the computer system. It's the telephone system, whatever, that says you're paid so much, it's on file somewhere in Cosmos space, and then presumably the city enforcement division has that information.
Absolutely. So when we collect the payment data, we share that information with, I believe right now you use a firm called Ames Enforcement. So we share that payment information. So now that data gets transmitted to how they enforce through their handheld units, through their technology, so they can pinpoint to see when someone parked, when the time expired. So if you're buying, let's say, 1 hour's worth of parking, and you happen to be at your doctor's appointment and it's running a little late, you don't have to now run out to the meter and feed the meter, right? You could, at the convenience of the office in the moment, you can extend parking for another 30 minutes or however long you need. So there's this convenient element to it. There's also convenient elements to inclement weather, right? During hot days or cold days, it's just in the comfort of your vehicle, in your office, you can transact your parking. So the data that you will get, so whether it's on one side of the street or the other side of the street, we can get that granular to detail out where exactly parking transactions occurred. And then this way, that targeted information can be shared with the enforcement team so they can be dispatched or do targeted or focused enforcement.
We no longer have marking of tires and things like that.
No, I mean, no, we don't need to do that.
We won't be dealing with all of that anymore.
And I think that term is called chalking tires.
Presumably, we'll also be doing with this 2-hour parking zone or something like that.
Yeah, so you can certainly adjust your parameters. I mean, Rita and I were walking the city earlier this morning, and he was pinpointing different areas of the city where there's just growing demand or robustness in the evening with restaurants and nightlife and so forth. So maybe, that's an opportunity for adjust the policy for max timing. Maybe it's not 1 hour, maybe it's 2 hours. Maybe folks need 2 hours to complete their dinner, or maybe we extend for 3 hours so they can go for dinner and drinks thereafter. So that information, you'll start collecting it once all the transactions flow through the pay-by-phone system.
Councilmember Scipio.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting park and pay. I'm a dinosaur. I still like my 25-cent. I'm one of the few who remembers it as a child,
Yeah.
and it was 25 cents then.
Right.
Been many years. When you pay whatever that fee is
Yes.
that we charge, does that include the service fee that we, the city, has to pay to the provider?
So great question, Councilmember Scipio. We're going to touch on that a little bit further on.
Okay.
But yes, there is a fee associated. The fee, what I will say right now, is the fee that the parker sees on the app is the total fee that the parker pays. There will be no additional fees. We can get into a little bit deeper of a breakdown here in a couple of slides, though.
I was just known that on his demo, the fee was $1.65 or something. It was more than $1.50.
I was going to ask that too. It should be $1.87
Something
for a
like
$1.50.
that.
There's a pay-by-phone service charge, and that's how the partnership will work. So how does pay-by-phone come into the city? Why do they want to operate in the city? There's a per-transaction cost, and that's variable between each municipality. So the municipality gets one, another agency could get another rate. So there are the fees associated, and we will break that down in a couple slides.
Yeah, okay.
Councilmember Perkins.
Thank you. Just a question, we can add additional vehicles, and you suggested go ahead and add all that you may drive. What if you no longer have a vehicle? How easy is it to delete one and add a new one?
Oh, it's very easy. You just go to your account settings, and just like, let's say you misplaced your credit card. So time to time, you have to update the payment form, right? So it's just deleting the old one, entering new information. It's a matter of seconds.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Mundy.
Some of these questions have already been asked and answered, so thank you for that. Does the app remind you that your time is expiring?
It certainly does. It has a countdown clock,
Okay.
and about 10 to 15 minutes prior to expiration, it'll send you a reminder. If you opt in to receive text messages, or if you happen to have your app open, it'll give you reminders.
And there are people who don't even have a flip phone.
Yeah.
How do we accommodate them to
Yeah.
park, either with cash or paying by card?
So I think if you're using the pay-by-phone system, you can, obviously, you need to have a smartphone or just have access to a telephone so you can call in the toll-free number. Now, I think when you take a step back and look at the various options of payment in the city that still exists, you still have your payment kiosks, you still have your single-head meters where you're still collecting cash. So I think in order to cover all the particular needs of the parker, the city has all those covered. Now, in a situation where if pay-by-phone was the only form of payment, then that would be challenging. But I think with the department's plan with all these options would.
Thank you. And if I may add to that just briefly, so primarily this will be transitioning away from that, okay? And I'll make an argument that, Councilmember Money, there are as many folks that say that they want to pay with cash, there are that many and more that say, I don't have cash, I want to come to Winston-Salem, I don't have 25 cents, so I don't know what to do, right? So we still have that dynamic as well. But we have had internal discussions that if we find hotspots where there is a cash demand, then we have to explore a cash solution, which this solution wouldn't provide. And so there's been conversation about maybe some repurposing of the pay stations in the event where that is a must. But I think what you've heard is that this system will give us a lot of data that tells us if that's necessary or not.
When we get pushback, and you know we will, that's going to be one of the major pushbacks I think that you get, even from people who have a smartphone.
Sure.
But that's an easy one to push back on, so we need to know how to address that before we start getting that pushback.
We've talked about that.
All right. So we just did the demo. All right, let's move into the on-street operations. And how will this look with pay-by-phone? So off-street, Jeff mentioned it a little bit. We have gate arms, ticket spitters, stuff from 1999. What we're looking to moving towards is an automated process, a fully automated process. Implementation of clearly branded signs, some of those signs that you saw earlier in the presentation. We're going to kind of show you some more pictures of what Pay by Phone can offer in terms of signage. Quickly, we have about 1,600 spaces between 2 parking decks, about 6 or 7 surface lots. So what will this look like in our parking deck facilities? What will validate the parking through Pay by Phone? License plate reading cameras. If you can see towards the top of the pictures there, there's 3 cameras in each picture. That's a license plate reading camera, an LPR camera. What it does is when you enter, it scans your license plate. You're supposed to use the Pay by Phone system to pay for your parking on the off-street facility. In a perfect world, the parker uses the Pay by Phone system to pay. On the way out, it scans their license plate. Everything internally, all the technology works together with Pay by Phone, our enforcement software, and it validates. So let's use the scenario if you don't pay. That is when the violation comes in, and that's where Pay by Phone and AIMS, our enforcement software, integrate with one another. So if you don't pay, you will get a violation, and that's where this automated process comes in. The camera does the bulk of the work for you, scans your license plate in. If you don't park, it scans it on the way out. You get a violation using the DMV records that we can collect through the parking management software, and I'll touch on that in just a second. I jumped 1 slide ahead. So I'm going to call Sang back up to kind of talk about some of the signage that you can expect in our off-street facilities. Right here you have 3 signs. They're semi-customizable, I would say. We can put the city logo on them. We'll outfit our parking decks. Sang, if you want to kind of give a little more detail.
Yeah, this is an example of a city in the Northeast. It's a city of Concord. And what they had several garages, a very similar profile as your city here. But what they made a decision a while ago, they said, when folks come into our city, we want their parking. Parking is never the main event, right? Parking is just the front end, the 2 bookends of the reason why you come to a particular destination. So the city removed all the gates, all the ticket spitters and whatnot, and they just wanted a free-flowing experience so that it is, let's call it frictionless for the parker. Now, the concern is, if we do that, how do we control our revenue capture, accountability, and so forth? So, as Reed mentioned, with technology, with license plate readers, with our system to back that up, we share this information so that for folks who comply, business as usual. But for those that don't, there's a mechanism in place where we can, either issue citations or increase compliance or capture payment. So this example, we wanted to make it very highly visible. So all the stairwells, elevator banks, even on the drive aisles, you see the middle picture where we did customized decal covering concrete beams. So we're really introducing, this is the new way to pay for parking at this facility. So we'd rather over-communicate and over-educate as opposed to having, parkers wonder what is this new system, right? So this is just a sample signage that we've done for garages as well. But it's really about when this system is introduced, is really making everyone aware, be comfortable, the transportation team being available to answer any questions and to really help facilitate this transition.
All right. So let's talk about enforcement just a little bit here. So the enforcement platform currently is AIMS. Through conversations with Sang and other enforcement, we've landed on GTechna, an enforcement software capability that seamlessly integrates with Pay by Phone. It really offers the city the best solution to give when you think of enforcement, you think of they're the people who write the tickets. They enforce the ordinances, the regulations. So let's take it from a ticket. GTechna and Pay by Phone, when fully integrated, takes the enforcement officer will be able to drive by. It will ping if there's a violation. It will automatically send that ticket to the person's mailbox once fully integrated. Now, there's a lot of steps to get to that point. It includes the cameras at the parking deck. It includes outfitting our 3 scooters that you see riding around, the three-wheeled scooters with LPR cameras on the top of them. There's an internal invoice review with a staff person inside DOT. Once all the internal workings of the technology work, we get the address from DMV, and the ticket gets mailed to the person. Really what we're looking for here is this is a benefit to staff. Currently what it is enforcement has to get out of their vehicle, print the ticket, hopefully the printer works, everything's working that day, put it on the windshield. Then we have to make sure the next thing is, well, did the meter work? Is the person that we wrote a ticket, did the meter even work? We have a ton of appeals that come in that say, hey, the meter didn't work. So this really cleans all that up by using a technology solution with Pay by Phone, pairing it with G-Techna, and really streamlining this process. All right, so here we're going to get into the fees a little bit. So how does this partnership between Pay by Phone and the city of Winston-Salem look? So here's a scenario. You park on Liberty Street, and this is for 1 hour. We set the rate at $1.50. You pay $1.50 in the app. That's the fee you see in the app. On the back end, Pay by Phone takes 30 cents of each transaction. That was that fee that we were talking about where it said $150, but it ended up coming to $187. That's where that fee comes in. There's also a credit card fee that's associated with this, 2 separate fees. There's a 22-cent flat fee and then a 2.95% variable rate. And that rate is dependent on the rate, so $1.50, so that'd be 4 cents of $1.50 is 2.95%. So let's break it down a step further. So what does the city of Winston-Salem receive? We start at $1.50, we subtract 30 cents, which is the Pay by Phone transaction fee. We subtract the 22-cent flat rate credit card fee, and then we subtract that 4 cents, which is the 2.95% variable fee. The city of Winston-Salem receives 94 cents on a 1 hour parking session. Those were a lot of numbers. But with that, you have to also take into consideration if it's a 2-3 hour zone or people parking for just 1 hour, 2 hours, 3, things of that nature. So this is an example of just 1 hour. All right, so let's jump into what we're proposing our parking rates to be. So we've talked at length about the 25 cent and the meters. Our current rate structure, $1 for our off-street facilities, 6 Cherry Trade, 4th and Church, City Hall North, those lots. Our parking meters are at 25 cents, and our pay stations, mainly located in like this area of downtown, are at $1. Our proposed rate structure leaves the off-street facilities remains the same, $1 per hour. On-street is where we're going to propose the biggest change, to up to $1.50. And keep in mind that this is also calling for the removal of the meters, getting away with the pay station. It really streamlines our parking infrastructure from a maintenance standpoint. No more maintenance of meters that are out of date. If a pay station battery, since they're solar charged, if the battery dies, there's no more $300 battery just to replace it and get it back online. We're using a technology solution here to get to that $1.50. So the maintenance cost on our equipment goes down, our rate goes up. When we look at our peer cities, we pulled some of the biggest municipalities around us. Wilmington, we found, was in the $2.50 range. $1 for the first hour, then $2 for their off-street lots. Durham was $2.50 on-street, $2.25 for off. Charlotte, I've heard some rumors that $1.50 might not be lasting much longer. It might go up. Raleigh is $1 for the first hour, $2 after. And Greensboro is wrapping up a parking study. They're closest to where we are right now, but like I mentioned, they had just wrapped up a pretty extensive parking study in their municipality. So as Jeff mentioned, we have to incentivize, or we don't want to incentivize people to park on the street all day without paying, because it's more convenient to get a parking violation than it is to actually pay for parking. So our ticket prices will go from $15 to $30. That's what we're proposing. We benchmark peer cities: Charlotte 25, Raleigh 20, Durham 30, Wilmington 20. This falls more in line with where other municipalities are, and it takes out that convenience factor of, like I mentioned, parking on the street without paying. A lot of people right now say it's more convenient for me just to hop out of the car than fool with the pay station. A big thing for staff internally is an improved parking fine appeal process. When we integrate with Pay by Phone and GTechna, it really puts the emphasis on the parker to upload that appeal. Right now, like I mentioned, we're getting a ton of appeals for faulty equipment, and that's something that we need to address. This way, if you have a camera-based solution, technology-based solution, if we can present a violation and attach pictures of your license plate of you coming in and out of our facility or parked on our street, it makes staff's job a lot easier to determine if a ticket needs to be voided or not. Whereas right now, staff and enforcement is spending a bulk of their, well, a lot of time in the office when we should be out in the field enforcing those regulations. All right, so let's look at the past 5 years in the parking program. So when you think about 2019 pre-COVID, our revenues were around $916,000, $917,000. That includes our on and off-street facilities. You know, our equipment is working. It's starting to show those signs of extreme wear and tear. We're starting to get some equipment that's breaking. Some of the gate arms are being replaced with those 2x4s like I mentioned. Post-COVID 2022, we're coming out of COVID. We dropped a lot because of people were working from home, things of that nature. We're right at the $692,000 mark. We're starting to see the equipment really start to break down on us. We had 333 repair tickets for meters alone since March 2021. And I think we only have about 450 meters out there. So currently, from January of this year to August, including the on and off street, we're at $612,000. Just to give you a snapshot of our parking deck facilities, 4th and Church parking deck, the gate arms have been up for almost this entire year. I know that a lot of people are talking about that. 6 Cherry Trade, they're intermittently up and down. We're limping that system along. As Jeff mentioned, we can't get service agreements for the equipment anymore. And then the pay stations and the meters are coming in and out of order. Like I mentioned, it's quite expensive to just purchase a battery for a pay station and get it back up and running. All right. Projected revenues under the new parking management system, and bear with me for a second here. It's a table with a lot of numbers. We've talked about a good deal of these. So in the top left, you will see the on-street parking, and it starts at the $1.50. We take that 30-cent fee out. We take the credit card fee out. We take the 4-cent variable rate. You have the 94 cent that the city receives. I took it a couple steps further here. So it's very hard for me to project out what we can do because we have meters and pay stations that don't give us that rich data. So we have about 3,000 spaces in the city. I tried to take about a third of those on-street and off-street spaces and break it out over a day and then a year. So you'll see, I assume that people will come downtown for a 4-hour session. The city would make $5.44 on a 4-hour session. Now you might ask yourself, why is that number higher? The math doesn't really work that well. So if you do a 4-hour parking session, that's only one transaction. So the first hour, the city collects 94 cents. The second, third, and fourth, we collect $1.50. So that's where that 544 number comes from. If you expand that out over 450 spaces for 4 hours a day at $1.50, the city brings in $24.48. And then if you expand that over 250 operating days, you're looking at the 612,000 number. Again, all these numbers we've tried to just project out. It's very hard to collect the data. On off-street, we can run through the same scenario there. All the fees are the same, $1 per hour. You see that number at the bottom, $3.45 for a 4-hour session, $17.25 for a 4-hour session over 500 spaces a day, and then 250 operating days is $4.31, $2.50. Those are some small numbers right there. And then, so additionally, you can see right there, parking ticket revenues at $30 a violation. We average about 10,000 violations a year. So I just scaled that out, $300,000 is what we're looking at with ticket revenues. I'm called Sang back up. We're going to talk about how does this implementation look alongside the city.
So once again, this is just a real high level of the four major phases of when we partner with a city. We determine who will be merchant of record. So in this case, the Department of Transportation preferred that pay by phone where the merchant of record had. Basically, will help facilitate the credit processing so that this doesn't add burden on your finance and accounting team. We'll handle all that. Secondly, we're probably in the almost, we've got some very good draft design samples of signs and decals that we will need to install at the equipment level, at the facility level. Integrations, we talked about integrations with us, integrations with your existing enforcement service aims, and then at a future time, integrations with potentially a new enforcement partner, GTECNA. And then as we gear towards introducing our service to the city, there are a lot of things that my marketing team gets involved, as well as with your internal communications and marketing department. So we'll collaborate on how to communicate best through existing resources, new resources, social media, press releases. So we have a media kit that we can kind of share with you, as well as collaborate with your team. So we just want to make sure, like as I mentioned before, it's more about preparing our community to introduce them to a new service that will impact how they live and park here in the city. So those are just the high levels. And once again, the pace at which we move, it really is dictated by your leadership, right? It's just when will our community be ready? When will the DOT be ready with all the different partnerships that they need to engage? And then at the appropriate time, we hope to launch this when the city is prepared to do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sang. All right, so very quick, what's the long-term vision? Parkers, we want a one-time setup, an easy-to-get-to app, easier to park at city-owned facilities, updated processes, new payment options, and easy signage. What does it give the staff internally? Updated signage, easier to maintain, parking enforcement upgrades to allow the staff to fully automate, automated processes in our off-street facilities. The big one is the data availability, so we can if we ever have to come back to this committee and present on what does the data, what are the parkers telling us, that's where we can really come in and give a robust presentation. And another big thing internally is the reduced maintenance. So what does the city of Winston-Salem get? We're the city of arts and innovation. We've become a leader in parking management. We're creating a solvent parking solution, and we might be able to invest in future capital maintenance once we get this program up and running and start collecting that really rich data. We'll call Jeff back up.
Well, thank you for running the marathon with us. As we wrap up, I appreciate your time. What's next? So that's a lot. We expect it to be a lot for the community to digest as well. So having heard some feedback internally from our leadership and manager's office, we're going to go out for 2 public engagement sessions. Okay, we're nailing down those details. They will be sometime later this month, so stay tuned. We'll be sharing those accordingly, but we want to engage our community to see what the appetite is as well. And then moving forward, we do plan, at the direction of this committee, Mr. Chair, to bring this back into the October for consideration. At that time, we hope to have the comments that we heard. Whatever we hear from that, maybe we can expose those at that time. But again, October, we'll be asking for action if that's the pleasure of this committee. And then upon approval, we'll issue a notice to proceed shortly after that in November. And then implementation, you heard Sang mention there's a runway time, however we deem necessary, but we're targeting sometime spring of 2025. That's a lot. We're done. We're happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Thank you. Questions from committee and others? Councilmember Scipio.
Yes, I didn't quite understand enforcement on the street. I know the license plate readers are in the lots, but how do we enforce on-street parking?
So great question, Councilmember Scipio. So our scooters will be outfitted with license plate reading cameras on the top of them. It's going to be 2 cameras on the top, and it will scan license plates on the way through. And like I mentioned, the goal here is to make it as seamless as possible. Our goal is for the parking enforcement officer to not even have to get out of their vehicle and the ticket gets issued. That raises efficiency, and safety. Safety is a big thing that I look for in our parking enforcement officers, because if you get a parking ticket, you're probably not going to be too happy. We don't want to put our enforcement officers in any sort of danger.
So that answers my other question, is that those enforcement officers will stay employed. They will not be displaced by this technology.
Councilmember Scipio, the on-street enforcement officers will have a place in our parking program. We'll need them for enforcement solutions with this technology, yes.
That's great. And then my last desire, I like the fact that you give us expected revenues, but I love to know what the expenses are. I would like to know whether we gain anything from this technology. I think we do need to move into a better
Sure.
process with our parking, but I like to see what our expenses are to see if it's going to give us any profit.
Well, I'll say this, and Reed can correct me when I misspeak, but the largest upfront cost will be outfitting the equipment, right, to do the enforcement.
Yeah.
The fees associated are largely involve the user fees that you heard by the parker, right? That fee associated with their parking stay, right? That's the fee that will be transferring, or that our provider will see. So the contract value is very small. What the fee is the capital outlay up front to outfit the equipment signs and the equipment on the carts for the like cameras, et cetera, for the decks, et cetera. That's the largest upfront fee.
But that would require ongoing maintenance also.
Sure.
So, looking at the whole picture of parking operations, if we could see, okay, this is where we are. When we implement it, this is where we
Yep.
are.
We have a
And
lot of
then
those.
5 years out, we can estimate that it takes care of itself, pays for itself.
I'm happy to bring that back as an exhibit in October to show kind of what we assume to be some maintenance responsibilities for that equipment and show that projection.
Great.
Councilmember Burke, come over here.
Thank you. This was a great presentation, and I think we're long overdue for modernizing our parking program. One question, the on-street parking, will there be a fee? Will there be a fee for nights and weekends?
So that's a great question. Right now, there will be a fee for parking for 1 hour. And so that fee will be applied when the parker is parking in our city. So there is no classification of time. So now one of the things that you saw on my slide earlier, we currently enforce 8 to 5, right? And so what this allows us to do is maybe consider in the future some maybe second and third shift of enforcement, right? Or however we cover those grounds. But there will be, if you park in Winston-Salem, there will be a fee associated with that. It is subject to this, and Sam, correct me if I'm misspeaking, but the solution that allows us to set when we could charge or not charge. So it's consideration where we don't want to have that service. We don't want to charge anything overnight. That's something that we could probably consider, but there would be a fee associated with any parking stay downtown.
So one more thing, Jeff. I guess when you do your walk-in, your drop-in meetings, you'll kind of gauge the community about this night and weekend fee that we're considering, because we don't currently have one. It'll be interesting to see what kind of support we have for that. Thank you.
Fair, thank you.
Councilmember Larson?
This has been a great presentation, and I appreciate the time you spent putting it all together. My question really revolve around the budget and what the expenses in this project are. And I think what I'd like to see is what is the startup cost and who's covering the startup cost. And then as a consultant fees, is the fee $3 or 30 cents rather? Does that cover all the fees? In other words, is there payback based on the amount of tickets we sell, basically? Or is there a floor of some sort that we have to pay to meet a minimum requirement?
So Councilmember Larson, in 2023, the limited obligation bonds that we earmarked for downtown parking management, it was over $1 million that we earmarked for this solution. This was previously appropriated, does cover the initial rollout fee in its entirety. That assumes all the capital outlay I just mentioned to outfit our equipment. We're covered in that regard. There is an ongoing service fee, and there's some ongoing maintenance that we'll work with the budget office to do. We have certain operating expenses already currently budgeted in our on-street program. Well, we'll work with our budget team to make sure that that's appropriately satisfying that requirement. But for what we're seeing now, there will be no additional request of budget to support this program.
So the 30 cents per dollar fee is going to our consultants, I suppose.
The vendor, yes.
Yeah, many, so does that fluctuate based on the amount of parking we have going on at a time, or what, how's that?
Per transaction.
That's per transaction. Mhm. That's a flat
Obviously,
fee.
our
that-
transactions this year are less than they were before COVID. So we're projecting increased transactions years ahead. We're anticipating more money obviously going to them based on the transaction.
I'm not sure I'm following your
What
question.
I'm trying to, it's a sliding scale is what I'm trying to get to. Is it-
Yeah, I think the answer to your question is yes. Depending on how many parkers come in there, the scale will slide. So it's 30 cents per time somebody parks. When they leave, somebody else comes in, there's another 30 cents. So the $1.50 fee they're talking about per hour will cover that first charge every time. So yes, the more parkers we have,
Right.
the higher the fee will be. And if we have less parkers, the fee will go down. And that's all included in the calculation.
There's no floor, in other words, there's no minimum.
That's my understanding. There's no floor as to what we have to pay. If everybody decides they're not going to park in Winston-Salem anymore, then we spend all this money up for nothing, but we'll have a lot of space.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Money.
Will this affect in the decks, the long-term and reserved parking spots? Will that be handled separately, or?
We're committed to our long-term lease partners. Paid by Phone offers a solution to validate each person's parking, and that's part of the implementation, but the answer to your question is yes.
Okay. Is this going to be a flow-in or a swap-out? In other words, you're going to try to change the entire city at a time, or is it going to be by quadrant? What's the flow-in plan?
So as part of, I'll speak on street. So we're going to bring our entire on-street enforcement area online at one time. And what our goal is to have a little bit of overlap to where we can iron out all the problems, hope to iron out all the problems. Off-street, yes, as well. We're going to bring our 2 parking decks along with all the off-street facilities online as well.
I am so in favor of this, and it's long overdue, but I do want to play devil's advocate for 1 minute, especially as you're going out and talking to the community. If I come to an event and I'm in the deck and I know the event lasts an hour and a half and I pay for 2 hours, I come in, I get in my car and I drive away within that 2-hour period. But I exceed the 2-hour period by the time my license plate is red. So it will look like I have not paid for the entire time I'm in there. So I don't know how we accommodate that other than communicate it up front. But like if you're leaving the parking deck after National Black Theater Festival, it's going to take you 30 minutes to get out of that deck. So it's just something I think we need to be able to communicate clearly.
So Councilor Mundy, I think that's one of the benefits of this, because that's long been a complaint over at 6th Cherry and Trade, is that the time it takes when we have large events to get everybody that comes, has a transaction with the individual working the ticket booth there. This really allows us to, there should be no stopping. It should be a free flow. When you get in your car, you drive straight out.
So they get that faster, but it's they've still got to pay for that time between the parking space.
This should allow everybody to circle out and flush out all at once and get those folks out without having to go through that transaction at the gate arm.
And so that also means that the employees who are currently in those ticket booths will not be, we won't have an employee on site.
Let me take that. So there's still some, like I said, there's a runway here. We got to iron out those details now. This is a technology solution that does replace the need for that attendant to take that ticket, right? So we're going to be working with the leadership in the manager's office to determine how best to accommodate those positions that currently sit in DOT. So I don't have a great answer for you now, but I will say that as we roll this out, there will be a transition period for how we facilitate those personnel.
Councilor Mundy, I'll add to what Jeff said. Number one, we value those employees that have been with us for a long time, and we want to certainly be sensitive to them in this situation. So what we will be working with our HR department, frankly, we had to get to this point first to see if this is something that council's even interested in before we start spending that time to start really hitting a lot of what phase 2, which is a lot of what we've just been talking about. So we had to spend a lot of energy to get to this point and see if there was interest in moving forward. If there is, those are the areas we're going to be concentrating our efforts. And probably first and foremost of that is going to be the sensitivity to those existing employees that Jeff mentioned. Working on the HR department to see what, if we get to that point, what other positions are available that those individuals might be able to transition into so that we can keep them part of the city team. And I don't know if Pat's got anything else to add to that also.
So that's a fair statement. We'll be very considerate of our employees there. I don't think, as Jeff was mentioning, we don't know exactly what the employee count will be, but you will not need people in the booths. And so we do have people that are doing that now, so we'll be looking at whether there are other duties that can be assigned to them, either in that parking area or in other areas.
That's great. That's great. Thank you.
Good questions. Councilor Scipio.
Oh, I have another question. I used to winter in Las Vegas for some years ago. My daughter lived there, and I would go out there. And one of the things that happened at one of the casinos is they built this wonderful parking deck with the lights that show you where the spaces are available, and they now have that at either
Baptist Hospital.
Atrium or Novant. Does this app have the ability for us to be able to identify where the spaces are available in our decks?
Or on street.
Or on street?
Waze does. Waze notified me this morning that you can now, they'll tell you where a spot is, whether his does or not.
Yeah.
We got one, okay.
Like, in the current form right now, so if you imagine when we launch in the city, you'll have a visual on our app feature as to where the locations are, where the parking facilities. So if it's along Main Street between 5th and 6th, you'll see that whole strip highlighted as a location where pay by phone is accepted. Now, as technology evolves, can we provide like real-time occupancy? So that's what you're getting at, right? Like at the current moment, if I'm around the corner from Main Street, if I pull around, with high probability, is there a spot for me? In order for that to happen, we would probably have to ingest occupancy data from other technologies. So if there are sensors that are monitoring the spaces in the garages, if we have LPR cameras reading license plates, it might be a 1,000-space garage, but we already captured 800. So we still have 200 available spaces. So if we could ingest that availability data, we can certainly communicate it on our app. Right now, we're not there because of the scope of this project.
Councilor Scipio, if I can add a little bit of that, what you're kind of referring to is what I'd call phase 2 or 3. And those are the type of enhancements that we want to get to a position where we can start exploring for our parking program. To get there, we've got to get phase 1 kind of in place and establish this. But in a perfect world, if we can set this up and program it right, the intent of staff or the city is not to have a big money grab and raise the fees and generate all this revenue. The intent is to have a parking program that sustains itself, that pays for itself, that removes for the $700,000 a year subsidy from the general fund, so that hopefully frees up some money that you as a body can allocate to things that folks come to public hearings all the time and ask for. And ultimately, it puts a little bit of money back so that we can start considering improvements and enhancements down the road to get to things like you're talking about right there.
Thank you.
Yes.
So I just wanted to emphasize a couple of things. First of all, this will not change the handicap parking scenario. Those rules will not change. We need to re-examine those, but it will not, on the face of it, change them. Pricing will be set by the city. Okay, this has nothing to do with the furor that occurred a while back about private parking spaces being run by out-of-town people. We set the pricing. Staff will be involved, but pricing will be set by the city and not by a private company. I do have a question for the city attorney about when we had robust conversations about red light cameras. Part of the pushback was that people would beat the rap by saying, well, that wasn't me in the car. That people will not be able to say that I didn't park my car in that place, so I don't have to pay the fine.
Sorry, I was looking at the legislation.
I figured you would be.
I think that still may be an option by law they have. I have to look at it. They can provide an affidavit relative to that, but I have to study it some more. I was looking at it.
Okay. In all this, I think there's going to be some additional usage of our decks. Our decks are highly underutilized. Hopefully this will push some more people to our decks as our downtown continues to prosper as it will. We'll need that capacity. We'll need to push people to our decks. Our decks are still the best deal in town, and I think as we grow, we'll be able to push those rates up a little bit. But right now, if you get a monthly pass, it's $1.47 a day to park on our decks downtown. That's by far the best deal in town. So, I mean, all this to say, I think this is a very healthy position that we're in. The shock of going from 25 cents an hour, no offense intended, but we should have done this a long time ago. It's a big jump from 25 cents an hour or 25 cents for 2 hours to $1.50. But it's only a shock because we didn't do this gradually over a period of time. $700,000 subsidy to parking. That same $700,000 is what we pay the Bear team. When you look at it in that light, this is a no-brainer. We have to do this. Thank you all. This is a lot to take in. We're going out to ask the public for their view. It may not be as positive as the vibes we're getting in this room, but this is something we need to do as a city. That money is better spent elsewhere than on parking. So, thank you very much, guys. Great work. Thank you. A lot of crunching. Thank you for the deal that you brought to us. I look forward to partnering with you guys for a long time. I'm not going to be here for a long time, but I hope you guys will. Thank you very much. Staff, thank you. Great work. Appreciate it. Is that it? All right. Thank you so much. We're adjourned.